Hi, everybody. Happy Friday, and welcome to the 700 Club. In the news, Hamas says a truce is in effect after it launched a series of explosive rocket and airstrikes against Israel Thursday. Israel says the quiet from Hamas will be met with quiet from Israel. But as John Wagi reports, that doesn't do much to calm the nerves of the Israelis who live along the border with Gaza.
The current lull began after a Hamas Grad rocket landed in Beersheba, Israel's third largest city. Israel responded by blowing up a 5-story building it says was a Hamas headquarters. For more than 10 years, Israelis living near the Gaza Strip have had to put up with deadly rocket attacks, flaming kites and balloons, terror tunnels, and much more. And this is Ground Zero, the city of Sderot.
The children is very frightened. They're scaring, they're crying.
During a 24-hour period, Hamas pounded Israeli communities near Gaza with nearly 200 rockets. Now it's quiet. Asi Anikovich is a farmer. He says even his cows give less milk because of the rockets.
This situation is not good for the cows.
Despite the current halt in fighting, Israel's security cabinet directed the army to act with force against terrorist perpetrators.
The IDF is committed to defend the state of Israel, its civilians, and its sovereignty, and we are ready and prepared for different scenarios to come.
But Yedidya Harush, who lives in a border community, says the government needs to deal more harshly with Hamas.
Their goal is to continue this conflict as long as they can. We have to understand Hamas, with a long-term agreement, Hamas is no longer relevant. And their entire existence is based on hatred and killing and death. We make our lives holy while they make their death.
John Wagi, CBN News, Sderot, near the Israeli-Gaza border.
Well, Hamas may be saying that a truce is in effect, but you remember before those bombs fell, before that intrusion happened, there were discussions for peace. So don't take their word about much of anything, but pray for Israel, pray for Jerusalem, pray for the leadership there. You know, it's almost like God has set us as believers as a guard on the wall for them. So let's make sure that we do that faithfully. Well, here at home, the governor of Virginia has issued a state of emergency as thousands mark the one-year anniversary of deadly protests in Charlottesville. Wendy Griffith has that story from the CBN newsroom. Wendy?
That's right, Terry. This year, instead of marching, the Unite the Right movement plans to demonstrate in the nation's capital. CBN's Amber Strong shows us how police and churches in D.C. plan to keep the peace.
1 year after violence between white nationalists and counter-protesters rocked the college town of Charlottesville, Virginia, D.C. police are tightening their defenses, preparing for round 2.
I can assure you that the planning and coordination amongst MPD and our local and federal partners has been seamless.
The organizer of that Charlottesville Unite the Right rally has requested permission to gather here at Lafayette Park, right across from the White House this weekend. And counter-protesters like the Democratic Socialists of D.C., well, they plan to hit the streets too. D.C. Police Chief Peter Newsham says while his department has a duty to preserve the right to free speech, it must also protect citizens.
The law allows for First Amendment assemblies of any kind. The law does not allow for injury to persons or destruction of property.
This week, D.C. Metro assured to CBN News they will work to keep the ralliers separate, a major factor leading to the violence in Charlottesville. They also tell us, quote, "Our Special Operations Division is equipped to handle demonstrations of any stature." And in Virginia, Governor Ralph Northam declaring a state of emergency in preparation for any demonstrations, particularly in Charlottesville. Meanwhile, standing on the side of peace, dozens of pastors who plan to gather in both places.
We're going to worship Jesus and then intercede for the peace of Charlottesville, but also for the peace of the nation.
Bishop Harry Jackson, who helped lead a prayer march after last year's deadly events, says a lot has happened since then, and Charlottesville churches are working to close the doors of division.
Jesus said in the last days that nation will rise up against nation, ethnic group against ethnic group. That's going to continue to happen. Racial hatred will happen and will be played out everywhere except where the church has risen strong as salt and light.
Here in Washington, members of the United Methodist Church will host a Sunday service on the National Mall. Reverend Dr. Stacy Cole told CBN News the event will be the exercise of MLK's observation that the church is called to be the conscience of a nation. In that spirit, we call people to come together and speak the truth in love. Now, the organizer of that event tells us they expect more than 3,000 people from across denominations, an event they are calling United for Love. Amber Strong, CBN News, Washington.
Thanks, Amber. Well, church leaders in California are worried state lawmakers will soon pass a bill that could restrict their ministry. The bill outlaws sexual orientation change efforts and could strip therapists and churches of their ability to help those with same-sex attraction. It could also forbid the sale of books on that topic. Greg Bird, a spokesman for the California Family Council, says now is the time for believers in California to contact their lawmakers.
We've got some indications that they're starting to get worried because the churches are starting to speak up. And legislators need churches not to come out against them. There are plenty of Christians still in this state, and if they all speak up at once, that makes legislators very nervous.
LGBT supporters of the bill oppose Christian counseling to change sexual orientation. They say it's led to pain and suffering. The California legislative session ends August 31st. Well, the final frontier may soon become the next military battleground. The Trump administration is calling for a U.S. Space Force by the year 2020. Vice President Mike Pence says it's necessary to protect U.S. dominance in space as America faces growing threats from China and Russia. The first step would be to create a U.S. Space Command by the end of the year. It would have dedicated resources and be led by a 4-star general, a new Secretary of Space. The Pentagon will set up an office to buy satellites and develop new technology such as lasers and other weapons.
The space environment has fundamentally changed in the last generation. What was once peaceful and uncontested is now crowded and adversarial. Today, other nations are seeking to disrupt our space-based systems and challenge American supremacy in space as never before.
Congress would have to approve the new Space Force. Well, day after day, we see Christianity under attack here in the United States, and in some cases, it's become very ugly and personal. No one knows that more than Vice President Mike Pence. He became a target this week in a scathing opinion piece in the New York Times. But now supporters are speaking out in his defense. CBN's Jenna Browder has that story from Washington.
Just months after The View's Joy Behar apologized for her demeaning remarks about the vice president's faith, an even more vicious attack by columnist Frank Bruni. The headline, Mike Pence, Holy Terror. In it, Bruni calls Pence self-infatuated, a bigot, and a liar. His argument, President Trump may be bad, but Vice President Pence would be even worse because of his deeply held and practiced religious beliefs. What is your response to this column in the New York Times?
It just shows you the never-ending attack on Christianity, Christians, and really people of faith by the liberals and their namesake, leader in the New York Times.
Mark Lauder, the vice president's former press secretary, has known Pence for more than 25 years.
They're attacking a man, a good man, in the vice president of the United States, for primarily being a Christian and someone who believes.
The piece claims Pence is determined to, quote, mold the entire nation in the shape of his own faith, a regressive, repressive version of Christianity. Are Pence's views regressive and repressive?
No, absolutely not. He's worried about the success of our entire country and everyone in it.
Franklin Graham and other faith leaders quickly jumped to the defense. On Facebook, Graham wrote, quote, I am disappointed that the New York Times would stoop so low. I've never seen such hatred poured out against such a good man. Secretary of Energy Rick Perry also took a stand and says he's experienced the same kind of criticism.
Mike lives his life through his lens of faith. And again, I go back to, what part of the Ten Commandments, which one of those you don't like? And we argue in this country about a lot of different things.
So help me God.
Lauder says Pence meant those words, and Americans should want a leader who practices what he preaches.
That's the kind of leader we should aspire to want. And as long as we're focused on everyone's success, on everyone's well-being, and those words that are given to us in the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, that's where our focus should be for elected leaders, and that's what we have in Vice President Mike Pence.
In Washington, Jenna Browder, CBN News.
Thanks, Jenna. Well, Terry, the Bible says we'll be persecuted for our faith, so I guess this shouldn't come as too big of a surprise.
It doesn't come as a surprise, Wendy, but boy, I'm sure the rest of you agree with me. You just kind of shake your head saying, how did we get here? Yesterday, if you saw, we ran a story about Pastor Greg Lowry out in California, who's holding just a forum, I guess like a Billy Graham gathering in a stadium out there. And a billboard was taken down advertising where that was and when it was going to happen. No spiritual message on it, just because he was holding a Bible, and that was offensive to someone. This is the United States of America. You kind of feel like you went away somewhere and came back and suddenly everything had changed. You know, there's such a lack of civility in our culture today in how we communicate with each other. But to see this kind of ranting go on in print about a man strictly because of his faith is so un-American and really troubling. We all need to be in prayer and, as Wendy said, at the same time, not surprised that what has been prophesied is coming to pass. But let's be faithful in the hour we live in.